Hello, I'm Joe Glanfield, the Canadian coach. We're here at Great Britain Plymouth, and this is Coach's Corner. We ended up 6th here, which actually is, it's really not a bad result for us at this stage. But I think what it showed us, which we knew, is we're still limited on the conditions that we've raced in. And this was a new condition. It wasn't something we really experienced before, where we have a wind range that's sort of 40 degrees, a pressure range that's changing by about 5 knots and coming off and on the foils. And I think what we learned is there's some gaps in how we identify the long-term strategy whilst we're trying to sail the boat around the course. And I think it also identified how well we need to adapt from when we go from full foiling conditions, where you can expect to foil around the course, to marginal foiling conditions, where it's difficult to stay on the foils around the course. And actually today in Plymouth, we had better wind in the pre-start when we were training, and then it quite quickly dropped just before the first race. So it really tested how well we could adapt, and we got a bit to do there still. When we're racing around this short course, we don't have a navigator as such, but we do have someone whose responsibility it is to look at the software, which tells them where they are on the course, where other boats are on the course, and what their routing is around that course. So we have someone on board who is communicating distance to line. It's also communicating where the ley lines are and where the marks are, but their job isn't only navigation. So, in Sail GP, it must be unique across not only sailing, but most sports, in that we can see the data from our opposition. So it's incredibly useful for how we analyse our own performance and use those comparisons. Most sports, you have your data, but you don't have your opposition's data, and we actually have all the data coming off their boats as well. So what we try and do is we allocate different jobs to different people in the team in between events, and we can go away and look at specific situations on the race course and what different teams were doing in that. We can also look at trends and what are the trends rather than the specifics of what different teams do that are doing well in certain conditions. So it really does signpost us to what we're doing differently. What I think sometimes is complicated to work out is actually what's the important part of this. What's the sort of performance indicator that we should be concentrating on, and what do we just need to not worry because it's a cause of something else. The communication on a F50 is incredibly important. They are travelling around an insanely short course at very high speeds, and so it's incredibly easy to miss information or actually just to say too much. So what we've done is we've tried to have a communication playbook where on each leg of the course people know what they're responsible for and when they communicate those parts of the picture. And we also look at what changes about that in different conditions. How we work on it and how we get better at it is more about, we record it every day. And so it's something that we always listen to and look back. How well did we match what we said we wanted to do, and where were the differences? So it's an ever-evolving thing. And actually, because we're a new team, we haven't experienced every condition yet. So we're still finding out what needs to change about the communication in different situations and in different conditions. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to say much after race 2. It was quite a big crash, but because it was quite a big crash, we had a lot of repairing to do. So most of our time, there was a lot of time repairing and getting ready for the next race. But what I did say to them is, actually the way they're communicating was pretty good. The way they're starting was exceptional, and there wasn't a lot to change there. And it's quite funny because, one thing that has been unbelievable is how little we've crashed as a new team. These things happen in F50s. People crash, and people come off the foils and they nosedive hard. And we haven't experienced very much of that, partly because Billy's been so good, and partly because of the conditions we sailed in. So we were kind of expecting it at some point. So I think they recovered from it pretty well, and it was really good to see them actually just get back into race 3, despite the fact all the fairings were broken, and communicate really well, really good start again, and get a 3rd place. So the way we use the data, and certainly in slightly different ways, whether it's out on the water and racing, or whether it's after racing that day, or whether it's between events. On the water, it's very much me in the chase boat using it. I can have a tablet and look at what's coming in. If there's a few boats in a similar position on the racecourse, I can do a comparison and give that information back to the sailors. I don't normally do that during a race, but before a race. But what we also want is we want all our sailors to know how to use it, to know how to look it up. So actually, if they have something they want to look at, they know how to do that, and they can go and do that themselves. As soon as, if they had to rely on me to do all of that, it would be a problem with essentially 7 different sailors all interested in different things. It becomes a lot of work. So yes, we want the sailors to really know how to do it. They're not doing it on the water. On the water, it's me. But yeah, so that's how we use it. Yeah, so these boats essentially they need to be able to generate a certain amount of boat speed until they will take off and then be foiling. When they take off, then there's a huge reduction in drag, the apparent wind increases, and often they can then stay on the foils through quite light patches. But when they're not foiling, actually there's a lot of drag, and at times they'll have 2 holes in the water, they've got a foil which has got a lot of surface area, 2 rudders in the water. So actually there's a certain tipping point where if you have enough wind, you can generate enough speed to take off, and then suddenly you're foiling and you're super fast. So if you're racing in conditions where you're coming off and on the foils, then everything is about staying on the foils. How do we link up pressure to stay on the foils? How do we minimize maneuvers? How do we do maneuvers at the right time where we stand a chance? Because that's where you're always vulnerable, is each time you have to do a tack or a jibe, that's when you're vulnerable to coming off the foils. So actually, how do we do them in times where it's a good chance we'll stay on the foils? That's what everything's about in the conditions we experienced here on the 2nd day of Plymouth. Thank you very much. That's Coach's Corner concluded from here at Great Britain Sail GP Plymouth. So if you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments. See you next time.